Hey, I'm Alex Bonifer, and you're listening to Pod Clubhouse.
Pod Clubhouse.
Since you started coming around, I barely recognize her. She's all different. Worse.
No, she's not.
She never bottled me in the back of the head before being friends with you. Never almost murdered someone.
Shut up, Neil! You know I can make your life a lot more difficult, right?
You don't need to.
I don't need to. You told Diane.
Yeah. And I told my buddy Doug. And 2 kids I met on the bus. Jeez, I told Kevin when I found out.
What?
He laughed. He didn't listen to me at all. No one listens to me. No one. You can make my life more difficult? I'm not a problem for you. I've never been a problem for you. So please, just stay the hell away from me. And Patty. Okay?
Welcome to Kevin Can Podcast Himself, your dedicated after-show podcast for the AMC series Kevin Can Fuck Himself. This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Tonight we're discussing the penultimate episode of Kevin Can Fuck Himself. The episode was called The Problem. It was written and directed by showrunner Craig DiGregorio.
Just a community note, if you want to continue the conversation, please join us on Facebook and Kevin Can F Himself fans.
Just a reminder that we assume you've watched this episode, and we're not going to be doing a step-by-step recap of the episode. And if you don't want spoilers, obviously you should pause this podcast, go watch the episode, and then come on back. Caroline, how are we at the penultimate episode? Episode 7 of 8 of the final season.
I don't know. It feels like this went by way too fast. This was such a unique narrative to dive into, and I think it's really hit a lot of hearts of fans, and there's been so much great discussion. I'm very sorry for this series to be over so quickly.
They dropped the first 2 episodes on AMC Plus on that first week, but AMC viewers only got the episodes 1 week at a time, but somehow we're almost there. We're almost at the end. Yeah. We're 7 weeks in. It doesn't seem, I mean, we often find ourselves tracking the calendar year based on shows that we're covering.
We do. People have like Thanksgiving time and Christmas. We have like Kevin Can Fuck Himself time, Handmaid's Tale time.
Right. It was like New Year's. New Year's was celebrated with like 1883 in the Gilded Age. Right. And then, so, and then we went into the Westworld and now we're here. And so, yeah, it's kind of wild that this show is ending as we're getting ready for Halloween.
Which, to that point, you guys, as this show is ending, Pod Clubhouse is not ending at all. We've got a lot more shows for you guys. So please make sure you're subscribed over at podclubhouse.com or any of the awesome places like Spotify. Come on, Mike, help me. Pandora. Where else?
Oh, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music Podcasts.
All the podcast places, y'all. We know you're going to miss the show. We know you're going to miss this. But I mean, hey, you can still listen to us talk about other shows.
Sure. We got Your Honor coming up. We've got a new season of Yellowstone.
So
you and Paul are in the middle of Handmaid's Tale season 5. So
we are.
Lots of stuff popping off. Paul and his friend are covering Andor, right? And they're part of their ongoing Star Wars podcast.
And we can't forget Yellowstone is coming back in November.
That was the first one I said. I said the new season of
Yellowstone. Oh, man. That one
I listed so many.
Listen, it's worth a double mention because that one in particular is just, hot biz.
Well, and we cover the entire Yellowstone universe. So you have main feed Yellowstone, but then 1923, the second prequel series will be rolling along. 4 6s will be rolling along. Yeah. But Caroline, this is not the Yellowstone podcast. We've got to get focused. It's the penultimate episode.
Mike loves a penultimate episode. That is one of his favorite words to ever say, ever. So expect it to be used quite a bit. And for those of you who are like, what's a penultimate episode?
Penultimate means second to last. So it's always why I like penultimate episodes. Not only is it a fun word to say, I think oftentimes the penultimate episode is a more satisfying episode of television than the finale.
It's kind of like the Saturday of the weekend, whereas the finale is like Sunday, and there's a kind of like a letdown, oh, it's over kind of feeling. But Saturday, things are still exciting. The penultimate episode, there's still lots of weekend left.
It's extremely hard to nail a finale, and a series finale most of all. They're very hard to do because fans always want something more. Either a question isn't answered or something is resolved in a way that the populace doesn't like. But the penultimate episode, though, usually does everything. It does everything because it sets you up for that finale. So it has to be on board with everyone's expectations. So penultimate episodes tend to really hit the ground running in a great way. I think this was a great penultimate episode. I mean, I think last week, episode 6 really set the table for the final 2 episodes. And this one really put everyone in position, especially with that twist ending especially ending on such a serious note in the multicam section, the report of Allison, gone missing in a hiking accident.
But you're getting ahead of yourself. Let's get to our title card.
It was a Keno scratcher. And for those that are inclined to look at numbers, the numbers 258 were chosen. I don't get lost in the numbers when I get out of jail.
I totally do. I wanted so badly to have this revelation that somehow 258 was going to be like the area code and or the prefix to phone numbers in Maine. I had this like thought in my head. Somehow this was going to be it. I went looking. No, y'all. No, 258 is not. It's like Mozambique. It's like nothing that has anything to do with this. So I really did go looking. If you guys have an idea of what 258 might be referring to, maybe episode numbers, maybe just lucky numbers for Valerie Armstrong. I don't know what it's going to be, but please let us know what you think it might be.
2 + 5 is 7, which this episode is, and 8 is the final one.
And 8?
Yes.
It's like a 2-part ending, perhaps.
Do you know why 6 was afraid of 7?
Because 7, 8, 9.
You're damn right he did. You're damn right he did.
I have a dad, too.
I am a dad, so.
Do they just give you a book at the beginning when they give you a kid? Do they like, here's all the jokes?
As soon as they whack that kid on the back, they hand you your book. So it's all good.
7, 8, 9 is one of the first jokes.
It's you know what? Still makes me laugh. Makes me giggle, makes me snort. If delivered in the right way, it'll make me snort. So
hilarious.
I want to talk some episode themes.
Okay.
All right. We're going to have to go in the Wayback Machine. We're going way, way back to episode 4 of this season. You'll recall there was a birthday party for Patty, a horrible birthday party. And there was a scene in there that we called y'all's attention to that may come back to be important later. It was a scene between Allison and Tammy in the kitchen when they were lighting the birthday cake candles. Let's take a listen.
Not sure this required 2 people.
I wanted to include you.
No, I know. That's my way of saying thank you.
Can't wait to tell Patty that we got out of this actually liking each other.
I don't like you.
That's very rude.
No, it's not. It's true. And you don't like me. It's fine. People don't have to like each other.
No, I like you.
No, you don't. You don't like that I'm around all the time, and I don't like that you are. It's fine, really. But here's the thing. I should be around all the time. Me and Patty are together, and that's the point. And I don't know exactly what it is you want from her, but maybe you should just back off a little.
Now, we talked about at the time that was part of a theme of the season, going all the way back to episode 1 of the season. People were hearing truths that they should maybe actually take and listen to and incorporate into their life. Unfortunately, the truth was being delivered by the person they least wanted to hear it from. We had Neil saying things to Allison. We had Allison saying things to Neil. We had Neil and Patty exchanging words. Real hard truths coming from unfortunate sources. And this sounded like it was something to maybe put on the wall for later. Allison being told by the person she'd least want to hear it from, Tammy, that perhaps Patty would be better off without her around. That really hasn't come back into play until tonight's episode. There were 2 very significant areas where Allison heard once again she needed to back off. And I'm curious, Caroline, do you think that the scene with Tammy at the birthday party, together with the scene with Tammy that we're going to play in a second outside the motel, together with the scene with Neil outside the ice skating rink, did all of that maybe come together and actually drive her to leave at the end of the episode?
Yes, I think that there was absolutely a layering of all of these things because, I mean, of course, we start with the catalyst of Kevin, but in reality, there was a lot of things going wrong all around her. Tammy and Sam and Patty and everything, Nick and Neil, and just bunches of things that were just piling on to where, I mean, she had to get going.
I name a little behind the scenes for you guys listening. I name all of these clips that we listen to. So like when I pull them up on our player here, I can play them right into the episode. So back in episode 4, I had labeled that clip I just played Back Off. And the clip between Tammy and Allison today from episode 7's episode, I also, unbeknownst to me, also labeled Back Off. So it was definitely a theme that was in my head when it comes to Tammy talking to Allison. Let's listen to them outside the motel.
Neither of us listened when Patty said she didn't want any help.
Well, Patty doesn't always know what's best for her. Come on, you're not going to say that that's not fair to her, or I really don't know her?
Nope.
Allison, I told you to back off. You instigate, and you got her into this shit. And you're only thinking about yourself. Now, you might not be on that video, but I feel like you're right there next to her. But you're not going to say anything?
I just don't think I can say anything right to you at this point.
Not that I don't have anything to say to you, but I just don't know that I have anything right to say to you.
I was really struck by that line as well. I was thinking to myself, that might be one of those things that I need to put in my back pocket and just when I actually feel that way in my heart, instead of just trying to scramble and say something, how much better is it just to say, like, I don't think I can say anything right now. Like, this is where we are.
I think that line was made even more powerful because later on in the episode when Tammy actually finally confronts Patty, and who the two of them really didn't actually have a lot of interaction in this episode, which is interesting given how much their relationship was in the crosshairs in this episode. But that's Tammy really playing it behind the scenes with Allison than with Patty directly. When she confronts her with the Vermont footage, Patty plays pretty dumb and she doesn't admit to anything. And ultimately, Tammy gives her an ultimatum. Patty's response is, I don't know what to tell you, which very much echoes the same idea of there's nothing I can say to you that's the right thing to say to you.
I respect it, though. I really respect it because it's this level of honesty that is badly needed. And it's also this sort of giving in of like, I don't even have the energy or the desire to create some story or try to, scramble for you in any way. At this point, there's nothing left to be said.
You can only run and dodge and obfuscate and come up with lies, bad lies, good lies, whatever the type of lie it is for so long. Eventually, you just have to not say anything. And Allison, we've seen, is a horrible liar, as is Patty. So honestly, it is the best move for them at this point to just not say anything to Tammy.
It really, though, it screams this level of like self-awareness and confidence, though, because it actually takes a lot more to be quiet than it does to make up a story.
100%.
I mean, you have to have like nerves of steel to be like, there's nothing left for me to say. Like there's something into that.
But they've also tried making up stories too.
And it doesn't work.
Right. We're 7 hours into this new season. They've tried making up stories. They've tried coming up with cover stories. They have the restraint, and I give them credit for not coming up with another one. But it's not like they haven't tried though either. They've tried to throw her off the scent.
It's an excellent indicator though where the heads of our two, main women characters are with Patty and Allison, and that they're just truly at the end of their storyline right now, that there's nothing else that they can say to make up and try to dodge right now.
I want to go to the beginning of that clip where Allison says neither of us listened to Patty, which fine, neither of them did, right? She was clear to both of them, don't go looking for Neil, right? Tammy's response is the more telling one, and I think consistent with Tammy. She says that Patty doesn't know what's best for her. Man, that fucking bugs me. That line of thinking, we've seen it from Tammy a bunch, bugs me, but Caroline, we've also seen it from Allison. She didn't tell Patty about Neil and Diane for a month, we learned in this episode. She never told her about the Vermont footage. So she's also gatekeeping information from Patty.
I mean, for Allison, there's only so much information that she should really be putting onto Patty when she knows in her game plan, Patty's the one that's going to be left behind. So, how much do you really want to put on the shoulders of the person who's going to have to stay in the storm? That feels more fair than Tammy, because Tammy, it just comes off too like parenting again. It's really
uber controlling. Yeah.
Yes. And just using information to have power over someone else feels more dangerous. Allison's not doing it to have power over Patty. She's doing it to try to give her plausible deniability for stuff.
I certainly think that's the case with the Diane and Neil thing. I'm not sold that she didn't tell her about the Vermont footage for plausible deniability, because I feel like her not telling her about the Vermont footage was more to keep Patty having a nervous breakdown off of Allison's plate. I think that was as much about Allison trying to keep the lines as clear and unobstructed as possible for her own self, as well as Patty. I think for Patty's sake to an extent, but I think also there was a personal interest in not revealing that Vermont footage, because look at how Patty reacted at the end of the episode when she comes in. She's like, she knows about the Vermont. She's putting it together. She's having a meltdown. It's the most frantic we've seen Patty until Allison hugs her and quiets her, and she says, "I'll fix it." So Allison knew that was going to be Patty's reaction. So I think there was a personal interest in not telling her there. I think not telling her about Neil and Diane was more for Patty's peace of mind. Like, that was Patty has enough going on is kind of how I took it for not telling her. But as someone who doesn't like not being told things, no matter what it is. And I don't like
being in that spot either. The last thing I want to do is be like taken off guard by a third party. And while someone standing next to me knew very well I didn't know.
If I was Patty, I would get pretty pissed off if I came to the realization that she had kept both of those things from me.
Fair. So in this conversation, I'm willing to say that my needle changes a little bit and say maybe there's no good reason to really keep information from someone else that's an adult that can, handle the information however they want. Maybe there is no good reason. Maybe there is some degree of you have to let that person handle their own life in their own way. I can't preach independence when it comes to Tammy and then accept like a good friend or even a best friend keeping information from you. Maybe that's not fair, because I know we have a lot of people over in the Facebook group starting to kind of question about like, is Allison really the good guy? And remember, I'm going to say there are no good guys. There's no good. There's no bad. Everybody's got a little bit of something in them. There are worse guys and there are better guys, but nobody's purely good or bad. So I think that there's obviously some steps that Allison's taking here that, we can all definitely have a little squinty eye at.
Here's why this show is so good, because just like you just said, there's no all bad or all good person on the show. And guys, even Kevin is not all bad. I think his good is harder to find. Maybe he stumbles upon it accidentally, but he's not a one-dimensional character, I would say anyway. Even within his badness, there are levels to his cunning. And I think that's a credit to the show, is that you can't actually say Allison is all good or all bad, because it's all about perspective. From Allison's point of view, and one that I think is very defensible for her, is I'm doing everything I can to get out of this fucking situation. I am trapped. I will never be happy. I will have an early grave if I continue on in my current situation. So everything I do is justifiable. But as we've talked many times in this season, and I feel like I'm doing my best to dance on both sides of the argument, Diane has a legitimate beef with how Allison had treated her so far in not being there for the Chuck situation. Patty certainly, I think you can argue, has put herself out more for Allison than Allison has is for her from Patty's point of view. So certainly Neil feels like he's definitely in the right from his point of view when it comes to Allison. It's all about what point of view you're on and what side you want to be arguing from. And I think that's a credit to the show, because I think a lot of shows, dramas or comedies, are extremely one note, where they hit you over the head with this is the good guy or this is the good person, this is the bad person, and how dare you even question it. I think the show begs you to question who's good and who's bad.
And again, to have that perspective that, you know, what's good for one person isn't good for someone else, and trying to figure out how to strike some sort of balance, because we've had a lot of people argue in our Facebook group about things like Allison has every right to do anything to anyone because she's in a bad situation. And we've come back and been like, is that really true? Like, if you're in a bad situation, are you then allowed to use other people, take advantage of other people, do things that hurt their feelings or make them feel bad or small? Is that actually true? Or do you have some responsibility to not have shit roll downhill and hurt your friends and other family members and people who are hurting themselves? Do you have to have some degree of responsibility, even if you're a hurt person? And it gets very tricky, because, you know, no one wants to say that Allison should be tippy-toeing around friends and family when she's hurting and when she needs help. You know, at the same time, Patty's a hurt person, Diane's a hurt person. Like, nobody deserves to be the one to feel like they're getting taken advantage of.
There's a great example of that discussion, and actually in this episode, let's take a listen and talk about it. This is Sam and Allison.
Allison. Kevin decided Tammy's a problem. She won't be a cop in 3 days.
Okay, well, maybe she shouldn't be a cop. She planted evidence for her partner. Maybe she's asking for what's coming to her.
But she's Patty's girlfriend.
Well, maybe Patty deserves better.
Allison.
Sam! This is how I stay.
Okay. I just want to make sure you're still you on the other side of it.
I know what I'm doing.
This is how I stay is a powerful argument. And I think the people in the Facebook group and all the discourse about this show that's online, where we're talking about it, Reddit or Facebook or just on Twitter, everywhere, the response to Allison should be able to do whatever she wants to get out of this. You hear her rationalizing it here. And maybe she's not wrong to say maybe Tammy shouldn't be a cop. Maybe Tammy shouldn't be a cop. Maybe Patty does deserve better than what Tammy represents. But she's also rationalizing decisions she's making here. And the reason she's rationalizing is because this is how I get to stay. Now, okay, fine. But Sam, I think, has maybe the most important thing Sam's ever said in the show when he says, I just want to make sure you're still you, though, when you get on the other side. We can't act in such a way that when all of the dust settles, we're not recognizable to who we were before. Because then what did you do it for? Who did you protect if you are fundamentally changed?
But do you think that that's reasonable? I mean, I don't know if somebody can go through everything that Allison has gone through in this story in the last 2 seasons and have a realistic expectation that she would remain remotely the same as the person she was before this all started. That's where I get back to, like, Sam just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand the impact of everything that she's been through. And I had a moment, I posted a couple things on Facebook of, like, some of the, like, pilot episodes. Like, I forgot about her washing her mouth out after giving Kevin a blowjob.
Yeah.
Like, I forgot that scene in the bathroom and the mascara and the eyeliner all under her eyes and looking so just beat up and just upset. And someone else pointed out that in one of those first episodes that there appeared to be a bruise on her arm when she was in the doctor's office and she had a short sleeve shirt on, or like it's the gown, you know. No one can remember her wearing short sleeves much past that. And we've seen her with a dislocated arm. We've seen her with a big bruise on her face from him kicking the door. Like, let's remember that this is not, you know, minuscule little things that have been going on with this woman. She's been physically, emotionally, financially, every which way abused by this situation. Should she be the same person at the end? I mean, that kind of comes from a Sam of, like, Kevin's a clown thinking.
I hear you. Obviously, she needs to change to get out of the situation she's in. But I think the larger sentiment is, even with all of that, Allison, at your core, you are still a kind, loving person. That is who your natural tendency is and was. And remember, Sam knows her from before the Kevin days. So he's got the uncorrupted version of Allison, which we've used to criticize Sam and how he treats Allison, that he doesn't appreciate how she has grown and changed and the life experiences she's had. There is also something to be said about the fact that he knows the uncorrupted by Kevin and that world version of Allison. So I think to him, what he's saying is, you start planting evidence and making false statements about Tammy. At what point are you no longer the naturally good person that you actually are? How far can you go to escape your situation before it costs you who you are before all of this, or aside of all of this? I think that's what he's getting to say. And you see this narrative a lot of times, right? When someone takes on the mafia in a movie, they start killing because their people are being killed. Well, how many people do you kill before you're no better than the enemy that you're trying to take down? I think that's what Sam is getting at here.
And I really do understand that. And I'm going to say that people who have been in an abusive relationship will say there is no distance that I would be willing to get away from my original self in order to be safe and be finally rid of the person who is causing me all of this pain. It's a luxury. It's a privilege to get to keep your old self, but most people don't get to.
Sam's words are in her head, though, because I think maybe the most important scene of this show actually happens between Allison and Kevin in this episode. Not necessarily Kevin, because it happens afterwards. I'm talking about the scene where he says, he comes home from the police station, Kevin does. He says, all you have to do is sign this statement that says you saw Tammy planting evidence the night she came to the house after the shooting. And he's all kicking his heels and stuff. His problems are solved. And he leaves and he goes into the kitchen, but the camera stays in the multicam. Why? Kevin's not in the scene anymore. Why is it still in the multicam? It's not until she drops, slashes, throws the statement onto the coffee table and releases it from her hand that it switches back to the single cam. That moment, Caroline, I think is her choosing. There is, in fact, a line in the sand that she won't cross to get rid of her problems. I think that is Sam's words in her head acting on her, because I think that moment, the reason it stays in the multicam, is her choice to become a Kevin, like her mom, like Kevin himself, or not.
I agree with you very much. I think that was very clever with the camera work and the direction and everything that they were doing to try to give us that indicator of, like, you know, there is absolutely a line and there is like a point of which you can't come back from. I appreciate that it's like her fingers are on the edge of like the cliff and she's hanging on for sure, without a doubt. She's trying to say, you know, I can only go so far. She's like Meatloaf, right? I'd do anything, but I won't do that. So she's totally there, and I appreciate it. Again, though, she's done the hard work and she's had support from Patty in order to be able to be in this situation where she does have this, you know, body and the death certificate and all the things that have taken it to get to this point. There are plenty of people who wouldn't have had all these ducks in a row to be able to not go to the dark side. Hooray for her for having done the work. And also some amount of understanding for those people who would have signed and just said, I got to get out of here and I got to, like, really just walk away from everything and really keep as many people who could do harm to me or try to do anything to me or Patty or anyone, keep them as far away from those people as possible. I've got to do some damage on my way out. I'm going to have some amount of understanding for those people.
100%. And I do too. And it's not meant to be a judgment on them. But I think for Allison, just talking about Allison specifically, I think that moment literally represents the choice of which path is she going to go down. An unexpected fork in the road that I don't even think she realized she had reached. And she makes a choice. And it's there that she then goes next door. And you have this moment, which is, just a great moment between Annie Murphy and Mary Hollis.
Allison, she knows. Tammy knows that I was in Vermont. She's about to know everything else. She was asking a lot of questions. She knows that we have a connection to Nick, and it's all my fault. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
powerful. The music, the frantic, Patty's frantic energy, the music, the concussive beating, escalating, and then she hugs her and it stops. And then there's those long seconds of them just breathing and hugging. And she just says, I'll fix it. And she's made her choice. She had already made the choice to fix it in the living room when she throws down this statement. It's 3 minutes of just fucking masterful television making. People listening, go watch it again. From when Kevin leaves the scene, she stares at it, she makes her choice as she goes across next door to that moment when she says, I'll fix it. It's heart-stopping. It's great television. It's absolute great television.
That silence also that we have there, and I'm glad you left it in, and because it would have been easy to edit it out or anything, but that pause, that quiet pause where you can imagine in your head Allison just staring at Patty. The quiet feels like you can put it under the same category as Patty saying, there's nothing else I have to say about this, or Allison being like, I don't think I can say anything right. Like there's a shift. No longer are we over explaining. No longer are we making excuses. There's just a lot more quiet that's happening. And I think that that's remarkable on TV because they tend to want to fill it with dialogue.
So much space to literally breathe. I mean, you and I, aside from this show, have been talking about calm and peace and blood pressure and breathing and just finding.
Oh, you can't bring up blood pressure. Y'all, I have real bad blood pressure, okay? And this past week was real bad. And this is why our podcast is coming out later than we would like. But the importance of quiet and taking a moment cannot be underscored.
The importance of a hug to quiet the drums, to quiet the frantic energy. Guys, sometimes it's just a hug. It's so well done. And you're 100% right. This is this show, this AMC show punching so much higher above its weight. What Valerie and Craig and Anna DeCosa and all of the writers on the show have done here, what Annie Murphy and Mary Hollis have done is just really, really spectacular.
I'm so glad that you highlighted Annie Murphy and Mary Hollis because I'm super sad that in the 2 seasons we haven't gotten an opportunity to talk with them. And I know in interviews that we've seen with them, there is definitely, a lot of impact that this show has had on them. I would love to learn more about how that's going to work. But for some reason, I get this vibe that they are going to keep more quiet about this than I would like them to be. I would really love to know everything about it. I know that Mary Hollis has said she has no interest in auditioning for multicam shows anymore. And I know that Annie Murphy in her interviews seems to have this kind of cloud of really this hit her, this hit her hard. I think that these two women, for as much praise as we've absolutely and time that we've given to a lot of the men with Alex Bonifer being on and Eric Peterson and Brian Howe, and we respect all of their work. We really haven't given enough time to these two actresses who have done just such a fantastic job of bringing these two characters to life in a way that felt real. I mean, there's so many ways this could have been done where these two characters came off very shallow or annoying or whatever to people. And really, they kept the heart of the show beating throughout this entire complicated and unique storytelling. I just give them so much credit. I hope they do more together, honestly.
Yeah, they've got a chemistry that you seldom see on television. When you hear Valerie Armstrong say in interviews that it's a show about female friendship more so than a woman in a toxic marriage, you get it when you see scenes like this. When you see the power of that moment between the two of them, you're like, yeah, I get it. I see it. I understand what you're saying when you say that. It's a great moment. It's a great moment. It really blew me away. I noted it when I watched it the first time. When I went back to watch it for more detail and taking notes, I was really kind of dumbstruck, and I watched it a couple of times, and it had the same effect on me. It really, really kind of stopped me in my tracks and just kind of say, wow. I want to go back to the original episode thing we were talking about, this idea of, is Patty better off if Allison stays away? Now, we started off talking about the Tammy aspect of it and how that may be affected the choices Allison makes in this episode and getting into her head. But I think we would be remiss if we did not talk about the interaction between Allison and Neil in this episode. These two go a bit of a ways, or Allison at least really does some olive branching here to try and get Neil to heal because he's just going around town telling literally everyone, Diane, Dougie, Kevin, two kids he met on the bus, the bartender at the C's. He's telling everyone about this story. And it led to this really great moment here, which I think if I'm Alex Bonifer, I'm probably submitting for my Emmy reel, maybe for supporting actor next year. It's a pretty great moment. Let's take a listen.
Yeah. All the stuff you put her through.
Me? Since you started coming around, I barely recognize her. She's all different. Worse.
No, she's not.
She never bottled me in the back of the head before being friends with you. Never almost murdered someone.
Shut up, Neil! You know I can make your life a lot more difficult, right?
You don't need to.
I don't need to. You told Diane.
Yeah. And I told my buddy Doug. And 2 kids I met on the bus. Jeez, I told Kevin when I found out.
What?
He laughed. He didn't listen to me at all. No one listens to me. No one. You can make my life more difficult? I'm not a problem for you. I've never been a problem for you. So please, just stay the hell away from me. And Patty. Okay?
Imagine being Allison, who has lived this life with Kevin and only, let's say, in the last year of the show's timeline, or less than a year, has realized how dire and how bad off she really is, and how abused she really is by her husband. And now you have these people who are not your abusive husband coming out of the woodwork left and right and telling you you're a bad person and you make the people around you sad and worse off, and to stay away and to back off. How can Allison not be affected by these interactions with Tammy and Neil?
I keep trying to decide how I feel about the fact that Neil says, I'm not a problem for you. Like, I was really dissecting that in my brain. Like, was Neil in isolation a problem for Allison, or is it his partnership, the dynamic between him and Kevin, the problem for Allison? Like, I was really trying to work on that. And I had to come to the place of like, that's just revisionist history because he is a problem for Allison and he does bolster Kevin, right? And so I don't know if it's right to say, I'm not a problem for you. I mean, do you buy into that?
No. But again, this is the conversation we were having before about from these characters' point of view, they are 100% sure of their convictions. He says at the beginning of the day, when it's still daylight out, when he tells her about being banned from the ice skating rink, Neil has, with a straight face, says, it wasn't my fault that they got banned. Motherfucker, you threw a glass bottle onto the ice. You smashed it in a drunken rage and went on God knows what kind of like chaotic rampage through the ice skating rink. It wasn't your fault, sir? No, it was your fault. You have to, he's still not taking responsibility for his actions. He's never apologized for attacking her, mauling her in the most aggressive, going to kill you kinds of ways. That can't be swept under the rug. And the show, again, to its credit, has done such a good job of making you kind of feel for Neil in these moments. And several times, especially watching him with Diane, you're like, Neil, man, what a sad puppy. Yeah, for sure. Sad puppy, but he's a giant sad puppy who is violent, who has been in prison enough times that people know he gets lost in the fucking numbers of Keno. How many times has Neil been in jail? That Patty knows the courthouse, the city hall courthouse, so well. Like, this is not a good guy, guys. Like, he's not a good guy. Objectively, not a good guy. But here we are, and you listen to him in that moment, and you're like, fuck, Allison, Neil wasn't a problem for you. No, he absolutely was a problem for you. He tried choking you to death.
Yes. I mean, good Lord, let's not forget that. I mean, how could I have just said that he like bolstered Kevin, but then at the same time not mentioned the choke out scene in the kitchen?
But that's what the show has done. That's the power of the show.
I mean, it's very tricky the way that that he is retelling. And again, maybe that tells us something. I mean, remember when we had the episode title Unreliable Narrator, and we wondered about who exactly was an unreliable narrator? At the end of the day, we kind of came up with, sort of everybody is, and even the audience, we are, and everybody kind of has their own point of view. I think that's an important part to remember. From his point of view, he takes the fall for Kevin a lot. He ends up, the one left alone, in his own little dirty apartment or whatever, trying to just make do. While Kevin has a wife and a life and a whole thing going on and a job, and he kind of sidelines himself, but that's through his own point of view, right? I mean, again, he did, come barreling out of a laundry room and choke her out. Like, he doesn't see himself for what he is at all. The scariest of all predators, right? When they don't even see themselves as anything.
Right. When they genuinely believe that they haven't done anything wrong. When you can say it's not your fault that you've been banned for the ice rink. When we saw what he did, talk about the most unreliable of narrators, for sure.
Okay, can we talk for a second about that scene? Because I'm a little puzzled by two moments here that I need to ask you about. It has to do with either directing or something that was happening here that maybe I didn't catch. Okay, when they go in the ice rink, it's most definitely daytime. Mm-hmm. But then it's nighttime.
Yeah.
And that seemed so odd. There was another time when Allison was in the car with Patty. She seems like woozy, and there's like a weird camera effect. Like, am I missing anything about what's happening here?
I think the wooziness factor, because it's not like when she was with Patty where she almost kind of faints. That almost felt like either pressure or just being extremely tired, which we know she's going through a bout of insomnia in this episode. In the car, it's not just her kind of going faint. The camera actually does almost like a psychedelic effect.
Right, like a Scooby-Doo, like
it kind of it vibrates. And it made me wonder later on if she actually in fact lost time, because it's Neil coming in ranting about, he can't believe that he's still banned, like it didn't work. That's what brings her out of that camera moment, whatever it is. I wonder if she did black out or somehow lose time.
What's the implications of that? Or are there any? Because that just feels like we haven't had that before, and what is happening?
It was something we've never seen before. What happens in the car there, it's an effect that we hadn't seen before in the show. And then when she tells him in the rink, she says, "Come on," and he comes in, and then he's staying there, and she comes over and she's like, I fixed it with Mike, the Zamboni driver, and all that. And they come out and he leaves, he go out, and it's nighttime. She does say she's wasted her whole afternoon, so it sounds like it took her quite a while to convince the Zamboni driver to unban Neil. I don't know. I feel like maybe she did lose time. It is a weird thing.
Can I put up on the board, and I do not believe this, but I'm going to put up on the board, because when a show does something subtle but very different like that, you got to put it at least up on the board, right? To pay attention.
Yeah, it's a question mark for sure. Yeah.
I'm going to say that whatever happens moving forward from here to the end of the series, this woozy moment / perhaps lost time, we know she's having this insomnia sitch, cracks the door to is the end of this any type of dream sequence. I'm just putting it on the board because there's something about having a lost time moment that you have to be willing to leave a Saint Elsewhere / what happened to this character at the end. Was this all reality? That anything that happens past this point?
I would be lying if I didn't tell you the idea that Kevin Can Fuck Himself takes place in the Tommy Westfall universe.
And the little snow globe.
Yes, it's very exciting to me. How about this? How about, given the sitcom multicam aspect, the single cam, multicam aspect of the show, maybe the camera moment represents not a dream, maybe it represents her having some kind of actual mental breakdown, or some kind of schism or split in her personality, or just her psyche falling apart.
See, I'm willing to leave this on the board, and only because
I don't think either of those are true.
But I want to leave room because of fans, this is way more fun when we're reviewing to not say this is exactly what happened at the end. It's a lot more fun for us to discuss this and say, you know what, someone's going to see this and they're going to take that little tiny piece that doesn't seem the same as everything else and say, if you didn't pick up on that little cue, then you didn't understand the end of this whole thing, because there's going to be people who do that.
Yes, for sure. And it's our job as people who review this show to help, I think, point out things and highlight things and put things on our conspiracy board and put question marks on things, point you along in the directions and ask the right questions. I think that's our job anyway. I think that's how we approach this. So it's definitely a moment that you have to put on the board and say, what was that? I want to go to our original episode theme question now that we've listened to all of the, actually, before we do that, let me just going back to Neil and being an unreliable narrator. Let's listen to this clip. This is actually when they're driving to the ice rink.
I know this whole thing has taken a toll on you. And it's taken a toll on me, too. You know, no one wanted this to happen.
Stay left at the fork.
I know I haven't said this, but I am sorry. For a lot of things. And I feel like on some level, maybe you are too. Maybe we've both made mistakes, and maybe we can just get past them. I can if you can.
You look like shit.
I feel like shit.
Yeah, join the club.
There's an episode in Friday Night Lights, for those of you that watched it, where Billy and Tim Riggins are starting Riggins Rigs. And Billy is riding Tim hard about taking too long on fixing a car. And he starts going off on all these different problems that he has. And Tim Riggins starts yelling at him about how Billy is hogging the violin, that tiny violin. He's hogging it too much. He needs to share the violin. He's hogging that tiniest little violin in the world. And that's all I thought about, because I'm currently rewatching Friday Night Lights. But here, that's all I thought about listening to Neil. Like, join the club. Again, this is from his point of view. He is the aggrieved party here. The situation he finds himself in is entirely of his making. If he doesn't attack Allison, Patty doesn't hit him with a bottle. You know, if he doesn't start sleeping with Diane, she doesn't walk away from him when he chooses Kevin over her and call having sex with her weird and stupid.
Oh, Lord. You never even went back to that weird and stupid thing.
I never did. I had a whole section of my notes and we just went right past it last week.
Because it's really horrifying thing to say to somebody.
Oh, man, we were supposed to hang out last night. I totally spaced.
Bullshit.
Kevin called. There was this whole hot tub thing, and he got mad at me, and I got distracted. He pointed out I've been MIA a lot lately, and I think he's right. You know, I've been spending way too much time on other stuff.
But you hate Kevin.
What? Kevin's my best friend. He looks out for me, and I've been really shitty to him lately.
Okay, is that true, or is that just what he tells you?
No, this is my fault. And it's because of us that I've been acting shitty. This whole thing is weird and stupid.
Having sex with me is weird and stupid?
Well, yeah, kinda.
Hey guys, pro tip out there. Ladies don't like it when you tell them having sex with them is weird and stupid.
And ladies, if someone says that having sex with you is weird and stupid, just turn on your heel and walk away. That dude's not worth your time.
I guess if any person says having sex with you is weird and stupid, you don't need that in your life. Having sex with you is wonderful.
Yeah, that should be the only word you say to that person.
That person should be lucky to be having sex with you. It is not weird and stupid.
Right?
You are fantastic at sex.
You are wonderful.
You are
Nobody
wonderful
should
at
say
the sex.
Anything like that.
Not
yes.
weird, not stupid, hot.
Definitely.
Hot
Yes.
sex business.
Yes. God, y'all. Keep your standards high. Weird and stupid is definitely no good.
So Neil, larger point. Neil and his join the club, look like shit, feel like shit. Dude, it's all of your own making. Now, and Allison can't say some of Allison's life problems are of her own making, but the larger problems, the real highlighted, shitty, bold, underlined problems of Allison's life are not of her own making. Neil, you are not the same.
I can't be a big jerk about this, but I mean, Neil had this, I mean, they really do highlight Neil and Patty's upbringing and how shitty that whole situation was, and everything with that whole mess was real bad, right? And then it is like, yes, he chose Kevin to be a friend, but man, the amount of times that Kevin seems to allow Neil to just take the fall and be the one that gets arrested, I don't know. This is where I go back to the show is well written in that it's not clear. Kevin, you know, absolutely affected Neil's life. Neil has had shit that's happened in his life, but you know, again, we crossed all the lines when we had the kitchen scene. I mean, all the lines. That's when you lose the who did what to the who now game. Neil, you lose.
Is Patty better off if Allison goes away? I don't know that there's a definite answer. I know Tammy thinks Patty would be better off. I know Neil thinks Patty would be better off. Listen to this. Listen to Patty in her own mouth, because she kind of weighs in on this without realizing she's really weighing in on this question.
Wait a minute. What does any of this matter?
Well, Tammy's a cop and we're criminals, if you want to look at it in black and white.
No, what does this matter if you're gone? Neil can say whatever he wants. That's the point, right? And I can blame you for everything. You just have to go. Soon.
I didn't want to say anything until I thought it was possible. But I want to stay.
You do? Why?
And I think I can, but I know you're only helping me so you can get me out of here. And I pulled you into this, so if you still want me to go.
No. I don't. What do we have to do?
Patty doesn't think she'd be better off if Allison went away. And at the end of the day, is that the only person that it really matters? Right? Does it matter what Tammy thinks? Does it matter what Neil thinks about whether or not Patty is better off if Allison goes or stays? Or is it really just Patty that matters?
I definitely think it's just Patty. The moment of that clip that really hits my heart is Allison is speaking and she goes right over the fact when Patty says, "You don't want to leave. Why?" And Allison just keeps talking. It's like every part of me would be like, no, answer me why? Like, because she, you know, obviously she wants her to say because of you, and because of our relationship. And, you know, we have not delved into the Patty Allison relationship.
We have not.
And we touched on it early on when we asked people to kind of talk back with us a little bit about whether this was purely a deep female friendship. Was this purely a one-sided, perhaps, lesbian relationship? Like, what is this? And at the end of the day, like, you and I could not come up with a label for it. And we left it at the Schitt's Creek. Like, there's no good label for this. Like, this is just a very deep, intense relationship between two people who absolutely need each other in their lives. I don't know that there is a good label for it or that it needs a good label.
I think Patty definitely has romantic feelings for Allison. I don't think Allison has sexual romantic feelings for Patty. Beyond that, though, but I think it is the kind of deep friendship aspect, but I think there is a romantic imbalance there, and I still think that. I've always thought that.
I think what I'm getting from you is that you think Allison is not a lesbian. She's not interested in the actual sexual act of having sex. But when it comes to saying you're in a relationship, even a romantic relationship, plenty of people have that, whether someone is unable to have sex or whether they just don't have that part of their relationship. And they have a truly like nurturing, romantic, we are each other's partners, one and onlys kind of thing where they're not having sex with other people. They're not doing anything. Like, they are monogamous with one another and sex isn't a part of it. So I don't even know if that is. Listen, I just went like, I won't even know.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I qualified the sex aspect of it, though, because I don't think she is in love with Patty in a sexual attraction kind of way, where I do think Patty is for Allison just based on body language and intensity. But I think they have a loving relationship, which I'm happy you brought that up, Caroline, because that's actually, there's a great discussion on love and love versus not being alone that's brought up in this conversation in this episode. You are a segue master, whether you realize it.
I might have the notes in advance.
Let's listen to a wisdom font Her name is Diane.
That's not what I meant. Just if you're gonna hang out with Neil, you gotta. Well, I worry about you, not him.
I'm a big girl, Patty. I can take care of myself.
Okay, well, you started this thing with him, so I guess we could both say that your judgment's just a little bit off. I'm sorry.
When I met Chuck, it was like a choice, you know? I decided to love him, but with Neil, it's...
Wait, you love Neil?
I don't know. Maybe I just don't want to be alone. And maybe there's not always a difference.
Maybe I just don't want to be alone. Maybe there isn't always a difference. Maybe gets said a lot in this episode. Just in highlighting these audio clips, we're hearing the word maybe a lot, which is interesting in of itself.
What do you make of that? What do you make of the maybes?
I think because life is not black and white. I think a lot of things that happen in life are in that gray area, and that gray area is dictated by maybe.
I also think that this group of people have a significant lack of confidence, and they're not going to present anything as a, I know this to be true. But if you say it as a maybe, then maybe you don't get pounced on, because it's like, I just said maybe.
Right? When you say for sure, when you say it definitively, you're opening yourself up.
This is what I know for sure.
Right. This is what I know to be true. Another podcast series that is available to you in the archives of Pod Clubhouse.
I want to do one that's just like what I know for sure.
I was doing the Mark Ruffalo show. I know this much is true.
Yeah, no, that's true. But also I want to do like a This is Caroline and whomever else, Mike, if you want to. And these are the things I know that's true.
It's going to be a lot about ice cream with me. I know
Weird.
a lot of things about ice cream to be true. And eating my feelings.
Eating your feelings.
But yeah, so maybe I don't want to be alone. Maybe there isn't always a difference. This is the beauty of the show. You can take this Diane clip having a conversation with Patty about Neil, and you can apply it maybe to Allison and Patty themselves. Maybe it isn't love in the sexual, romantic, but maybe it is just about being there for someone and someone being there for you. And maybe that's enough. But maybe it's enough just to know someone is out there worried about how you are doing and where you are and what you're up to, and you are worried about them in the same way. Maybe that's enough, because I think that's a lot more than a lot of people have.
I agree. And I commend the writers again for creating this space where it's like, what about this concept of love? And friendship doesn't do it for me. That's not enough of a word. Like some sort of like
powerful enough.
It's not. There's some sort of like partnership, companionship, something. I wish I had the right word for it, where it's like you are, like I said, monogamously committed to one another to have each other's back in this way that's bigger than best friends, bigger than the words that I even have. I don't even have quite the right vocabulary, which is amazing when you can create such a unique situation that is identifiable. Like I know people like this who absolutely depend on each other like this, but there's no good word for it. Wow. That is incredible.
I think it
You're
just
like, I have to get some ice cream.
In just this episode alone, I feel like we have highlighted a lot of important concepts that the show is trying to tell us and trying to get us, grabbing us by the shoulders and shaking us until we listen.
Do you remember in Sex and the City where basically at the end of the whole thing, they say, what if we're each other's soulmates and the men are just the side piece kind of part of our lives? Like, what if it's really about, our friendship and all that kind of stuff? I mean, this feels like a more refined version of that, where we're really focused on this one relationship. What if we are meant to be here for each other? And if we date other people or if we have other people in our lives, that's all fine. But like, what if we are the foundational relationship for each other?
I mean, look at the Golden Girls. I mean, isn't that what those four had together at the end when all was said and done?
Yeah, a truly foundational relationship that you could rely on. It could be your touchstone, and it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship necessarily. That's a fresh idea, though, Mike, for the most part. I know that Sex and the City brought it up, but that's a fresh concept for a lot of the people who would be watching the show.
100%. Now, there's probably an interesting conversation and one I'm wholly unqualified to get into.
We're wholly unqualified to talk about every single thing we've said.
But why in the few examples that we have to point to, Sex and the City, Golden Girls, and Allison and Patty here, certainly not Tammy. Why is it females that we're hearing this from and not males? Is there something particular about the female friendship in real life, or at least as television understands real life? There was no prep on this. This was not a question in the notes to think about, or I'm literally coming up with it. I'm saying it as I'm coming up with it. Do you think there's something unique in the female friendship, which I think is different than the male friendship, that allows you to have this kind of foundational relationship?
You're making me think real hard. I don't know that I have an answer off the top of my head right this very second.
Let's all think about it, though. I mean, even if we don't have an answer here, let's definitely revisit it. People listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts on it, too, when you have time to kind of digest it. I'm curious, because I don't know. I have a thought on it, but it's not a well-thought-out thought, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but to the extent you want to go for it, go for it.
I'm gonna definitely think about it. Let's absolutely put it on the board for our next conversation.
In her head, this is Caroline right now.
Fuck you.
It's nowhere near that strong. I really am like running through my feelings because I 100% have had relationships with various people over the years that, have been more important than what you would think, that I don't even know how to say that. I mean, I've been married for a very long time. And so I know a lot of people who have the feeling that like, if you are married, that's your one and only relationship. And I think that there's times when, especially for me, when my kids were small, my husband worked outside the house. And so he's gone. I relied heavily on other women to, be my support system and be the people who kept me going every day. I know it like takes a village and all that kind of stuff, but there's something very bonding about those moments. I actually just met up, hilariously enough, last weekend after having not seen a lot of these women for probably a good 10 or 15 years because my kids are like 20 now. I haven't seen them since everyone started school, right? So 5, 6 years old, everyone started school. People kind of went a little bit in their separate ways. But when we had all these little guys, I have multiple, so I have twins, and then I have another one that's only 10 and a half months younger. I had all these babies, and it really took this bonding relationship I had with all these other women. And guess what? All these women showed up. There was like 25 women at this lunch who we had all been together. We had all been to play dates together. We had all been at all this stuff. And we could just look at each other. And in a second, you could dive into a health problem. You could dive into a marriage problem. You could dive into a financial problem with any single one of these women because the bond was just that deep and that real that like you didn't have to hold back. You didn't have to worry. You knew your secrets were safe here. That's very unique. It was a place to really like share everything. I know that's saying a lot and we really said we would put this on the board, but I do relate to this idea that like I respect this concept of the outside of the romantic relationship and what those relationships really mean to people and how quickly they are ignored and sidelined because of a variety of reasons. People think, your primary relationship should be within, a marriage or your family or whatever, right? But these other relationships, the family you choose, right? Those people who really you feel like have your back. I traveled for a long time with a group of girls, same deal. I haven't seen some of them in years. I could start right up a conversation with them in an instant and it'd be like nothing changed.
My knee-jerk reaction is that it is a matter of vulnerability through societal conditioning or biology or evolution or a combination of all of that. I think women put together have a more accepted ability to be vulnerable with each other that allows them to make deeper and deepest bonds that can withstand the storm than men who, again, because of, I think, a lot of societal conditioning and the norms that we have grown up with generation over generation, have a wall, except for in very specific situations, doesn't allow them to access all the way to the core of the other. And so their bonds tend to be, they can be deep, but they are ultimately superficial in a way. I think in only certain cases do guys really let other guys into their very, very core in a way that bonds you. And it's not even in a mutually assured destruction kind of way, which for sure definitely makes friendships, but in a, I am a safe place for you. You can rest here. I think guys are conditioned to not allow themselves to be vulnerable that way, but I think women are. And I think it's a very nature nurture kind of thing. I think very still in the society, or at least American society, nurturing says that it's okay for women to allow that and not for men.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm going to hit a couple of things on that. I mean, I know that the way that there's a stereotypical like parenting, I know that you break that mold, and in many ways that you are the one that is making lunches and doing stuff like that maybe people would think is a mom role, but in reality, of course, it's a parent role, and you do a great job of breaking a lot of those stereotypes. I have to say that historically, because of the power structure of things, I mean, I think of things like women not being able to get a credit card or open a bank account or buy anything or have property for so long. I mean, we've barely had just like a handful of decades, really, that we've been able to do a lot of those things. That also forced a networking, portion of it all, of helping each other get the things we want, because we're kind of shut out from doing it through very formal ways, right? So we have to have a better sense of creating these quieter networks with one another to help one another, because we simply don't have the power structure's not in our, in our favor. I mean, I think of Iran this past week, or whatever, morality rules and stuff like that. And just the power structure of it all, we're on the wrong side of all that stuff. So working together and trying to help each other, that's always kind of been there. Whereas men have the actual formal structure of the world to get ahead. We have to kind of use each other more.
There was a line that has always stayed with me from the end of season 1 that really got to the heart of this relationship, whatever this relationship is that Allison and Patty have. And I think the show has only dived deeper into this and brought Allison further along in being able to say or express her feelings. But I want to take you back to the end of season 1. This is actually literally right before Neil and Allison have their altercation, before Neil attacks her in the kitchen.
Hey, I don't want you around because you're a good accomplice. You raised me from the dead. And, like, after all this, you're gonna leave. Without you... You're... What?
Without you, silence. What? Not terribly unlike I want to stay. Why? And she doesn't answer. Patty is there, open, doing the come on in, come in. It's okay, come in. And Allison is at that threshold, but won't say what's in her heart. And so I think it's hard to say what's in her heart because she won't say the next line. She didn't say it in episode 8 of season 1 at the very end of the first season. She doesn't say it here when asked why. She paves right over it and continues on. Why? Without you, what? It's great. But it's also maddening that we don't have more clarity on this. I think this show resonates for a lot of people because they see themselves in it. In all different characters at all different times, there are parts we said, I think way back in episode 1 of the series, at all times, sometimes we're Allison, sometimes we're Kevin. Almost everyone is guilty of being both at some point. Sometimes we're Patty, sometimes we're Allison when it comes to love and relationships and our feelings. I like that the show hasn't answered it, but it's also maddening that the show hasn't answered it because people want to see themselves in those roles.
I really wonder if we had been given more seasons, if we would have sussed this out better, if there would have been something more here that would have been explained to us, or if it would have remained vague. I know, and I don't want to shy away from any conversation about bisexuality, or, perhaps is Allison just a couple years away from realizing that she is romantically interested in Patty?
Which does pattern herself on Valerie's. If you listen to our interview, with Valerie Armstrong, she talks about how her identity, her sexual orientation identity came along later in life, in the same way perhaps that Patty is having this discovery, and maybe Allison hasn't even quite started that journey. So go listen to that interview too, that we had with her way back at the beginning of this season, because she talks a little bit about that. So it wouldn't surprise me if she's picking up on, if the characters are picking up on some of that also.
So unfortunately, again, we are not getting to spend enough time with these characters to really find out a lot about it. And I have full faith that Valerie and her writing team would have delved into this stuff and not at all shied away from it. So, all I can say is that I know in my heart that these two have a complicated and rich relationship, and that they absolutely need each other in their lives. And however that turns out, to answer your original question about would Patty be better off without Allison, I don't think so. I think that a healthy, happy, whole version of Allison would make Patty elated. Right now they're just in such, distress all the time. I understand why Allison thinks like the only thing she can do is really back off right now.
There's also perhaps a clue, and I've seen it, I've read about it, I've read it in a couple different places. I haven't done the investigative work myself, but there are people who see the multicolored coat that Allison wears as representing colors in the bisexual flag. If it is, again, another subtle nod to a journey that maybe Allison, if there is this underlying sexual identity discussion for Allison to have for herself, and she hasn't yet had it or hasn't started that journey, and maybe we won't get to see that journey because we're not going to be given future seasons of this show, that a subtle nod to it would make sense for the show writers to represent it in her coat. But also, how sad for us that we won't get to see how brilliantly this show would get to have that conversation. Because I think there are a few shows that would probably do it better than this one has, given how they've handled all of the other subject matters that they've tried to tackle over the years.
If this show were to be picked up, could it be picked up? Could there be more story? Does it have legs to continue on, and how would that look and what would happen? I'm curious. I want to leave that on the board. I don't know is the answer right this second, but I'd be really interested in delving in, make sure it's on our notes, Mike, to talk about could this be picked up? And if it did, where would we go?
If the show doesn't get picked up, I really would like to have Valerie on again. When we talked to her earlier in the season, we had talked about maybe having her back on at the end of the season, but maybe we do bring her back on a post-mortem or an autopsy on the show, and where we can drill down on what we saw and maybe pick her brain on what she would have seen in future episodes. Man,
write a book or something, Valerie. I want to know what happens more.
Continue our story, at least answer our very specific questions. So, I think all of that really takes us through a lot of the thrust of the episode, but there are definitely some things that I want to highlight here. I want to talk about weaponizing Kevin, because we didn't really talk about that at all. But just because Allison does it so masterfully in the beginning of the episode, where she kind of baits the Tammy hook for Kevin, I feel like we need to listen to it and talk about it just for a few minutes.
I started that fire.
What? What fire? Not the one that caused the blackout.
Yeah, that fire. I also started 2 other pretty big ones, but that's the main one for this conversation.
This is not good. Tammy's a great detective. Have you heard of the butcher of South Worcester?
No.
No one has. Tammy caught him before he could even start butchering.
Good Lord.
It's shocking that she's not higher up on the force. I bet she's hiding something weird on her record. She's good. She's not gonna rest until the arsonist... Well, you, I guess, is behind bars. Oh, what are we gonna do?
She's so good here. Clutching your chest, the soap opera level acting, the what are we gonna do? And then like glancing at like out of the corner of her eye. Really fun stuff. I really enjoyed watching this scene over and over again.
I got a super hard Judy Garland vibe out of that. That like, oh no, what are we going to do? Like, I think she says, what are we going to do? In almost that same exact pitch in Wizard of Oz. And I don't know, again, in our Wizard of Oz, our what exactly is this show conversation, I'm like, we've got 3 men. We've got like maybe a good witch next door. We've got like,
That makes Patty Glinda.
Yeah, I think so.
And Tammy, the Wicked Witch of the East.
And then we've got the 3 guys who I think we could fit them into some different...
You think Candace Coe can sing? We would take her on from Wicked and have her sing Defying Gravity? I wonder if she can sing. I would love that. Or have Mary Hollis and Candace Coe sing Popular.
I'm throwing this all out there.
I am. I'm putting it all out there, guys. If you're listening, hit us up with some wicked show tunes. You know, some fantastic, just good multicam stagecraft, you know, acting and selling it and baiting the hook. And you got to love Kevin and his dirty, dirty socks. That's all I could look at in that scene. When he flops on the bed, his socks that should be white are so gray.
Ew.
It was fantastic stuff. And let's not skip over the fact that he admits to having set 2 other very big fires. Not the subject of this discussion, though. Holy shit. 2 other big fires that we don't even know about? The guy is a menace.
There is a fascinating amount of like trust, though, and like the way that he's opening up more to her. You know, we talked a lot about how their relationship has changed over this last season and how like the more that she kind of plays the game, the more that he actually does go in for it with her like that, you know, like where there is more of that, like, oh, we're buddies in this and I'm going to tell you everything, like asking her to come into the hot tub and him like kind of doing those looks like, I like it when you talk like this. I want more of this kind of conversation. Like he actually says that at one point.
He says in this episode when she compliments, when she says you should get both sunglasses, he's like, I want to reinforce this type of behavior.
Right. He actually says it. But at the same time, she like just played along. You know, she didn't say, I don't care what sunglasses you get. She's like, I don't get both, you know, like there's something about the whole exchange that's changed a lot.
Well, you got to polish your gun. You got to clean your weapon or else it won't act correctly. And so she knows that. She knows it now. She's been woken up to the Matrix. And so she now understands how to operate within it. And she's doing a goddamn great job at it. Like she's really playing him like a violin, like a master, putting all the information out there that, oh, there must be something shady in her past about why she hasn't, you know, advanced further. Like she leaves all of the breadcrumbs that are perfect for Kevin. I mean, they're large fucking breadcrumbs, but Kevin needs that though, right? He's not so much about the nuance. She does a great job of baiting him with the hook to get him on her problem. Now, let's talk about the problem, because clearly the episode is supposed to make us think of Tammy, right? Given the conversation last week, you know, I know how to deal with my problems now. I just introduced them to Kevin, and Tammy being that problem introduced, you know, to Kevin in this episode. But clearly there's a double entendre at work there, right? Tammy and Neil very much see Allison as the problem. You know, it just goes back to that conversation that we had earlier about perspective and point of view of who is the problem. It's like last week with the machine, or the week before with, what was the episode title from the week before?
I don't know what it is from the week before, but Unreliable Narrator was another one that we were like, it's like, could be any of them.
Any of them could be the unreliable narrator. It's all about your perspective and your point of view. So just another fun title, unlike next week's episode, which is called Allison's House, which specifically speaks to Allison. I talked earlier about relatability. There's that scene when Patty is, I thought of you because I thought you would appreciate this scene when she is waiting for Neil to come home or waiting for word on where he is. And she's sitting in that disgusting pigsty of an apartment that he has, and she starts to clean. It was such a little moment, and it was wordless until Allison comes over and notes that she actually, in fact, did clean the apartment, and it looks fantastic. But it's such a human moment. That struck me as such a real thing. I think I would do that. So I think it struck me because I found it very relatable. I was curious if you picked up on that. And I think it's real for Patty too, who we've seen clean before, right? When Tammy was over and she started cleaning. So
Yeah, it's 100% me. I would be like nervous, energy cleaning, because I would have that desire to want to care for Neil, and then also have no good way to like funnel that into something since I don't have any access to him. So like cleaning up the space would feel like I'm contributing, but also like keeping my distance. That tracks perfectly.
Especially given and this is a total unrelated to Patty, but Sam makes that comment earlier about wanting to get out of Kevin a new vacuum. Like, Sam, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? Do better, Sam. But then you have Patty over there cleaning, though, and it's just this like weird juxtaposition of caretaker and nurturer and that role. And Patty is that nurturing role. That is her natural tendency.
Well, and she's saying out loud, like, I'm going to let him, just like sit in jail this time. I'm not going to be the one that is like the caretaker and bail him out and all that stuff. But yet she can't stop herself, from trying to help him anyway. Nor do I think siblings should stop themselves from like helping each other. I don't want to have a situation in my own life where family or friends would give up on me to a level of maybe they do think I need to sit in jail for the weekend or something, but please don't like give up on me, like I want there to be some level of hope, that I could be redeemed if I was in that scenario.
I don't have a relationship with my siblings, so I can't really relate to them, but I understand. Objectively, I can see what you're talking about. But a little part of my
heart wants to hope someday that might be okay. So, because that's me, right? Like, I want to retain some degree of like, maybe in some world that could be fixed.
You are a builder of bridges. That is your natural tendency. So
I just, yeah.
Here is the other very relatable moment. This is Insomnia Allison sitting on her porch in the middle of the night with her tea when Patty comes by. Let's take a listen.
Why are you sorry?
No, I'm not sorry. I don't know what I'm saying. I haven't slept in 2 days.
Because you're just so excited to die?
No, because I feel like I forgot something.
What'd you forget?
What? I knew I'd be able to sleep. I feel like I dropped something, and I feel it next to me, and I'm trying to figure out what it is, and I'm lying there, wide awake, just convinced if I don't pick it up, something terrible's gonna happen. You know what I mean?
So you dropped something.
See, I'm not making any sense. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry.
I feel her so hard in that scene. I have a job that has a lot of detail, like a lot of detailed nuance to it. And so frequently I'll wake up in the middle of the night and realize something didn't get done, or I forgot to cross a T or dot an I, and it just eats at you. And sometimes you can't remember the thing. I found that entire segment so relatable to a point that it actually disturbed me a little bit.
Talk it out. I want to hear this.
I mean, just this idea of, the metaphor. I mean, Patty thinks she's talking about something physical, right? Patty's taking her in a literal way here, but I understood Allison talking metaphorically, and she is. I mean, we learn later on she's talking about Neil. Neil is the something that she forgot, so she is talking metaphorically. But it felt to me metaphorical because I feel this constantly. This idea of, I don't know what I'm forgetting, but I know I'm forgetting something. I know enough to know I'm forgetting some detail that is important, and for whatever reason didn't write it down, or I can't access it. And the more I think about it, the more I can't access it. Where it happens to me all the time, where I'm trying to pull a name or a reference, and it'll come to me 3 days later randomly, but I couldn't pull it in the moment. I feel like that's Allison here. She knows there's a thread there. She's trying to pull at it, but it just won't go. And not being able to sleep about it, or being up in the middle of the night thinking about it, way too close to home for something that happens to be constantly.
What do you think? What percentage of this is potentially her ignoring her true feelings for Patty? that is not Neil that she's dropped, but it's this never really recognizing, because all the time she's prodded. What is it? Why? What is it? Why don't you want to go? But she like never says, like, is it possible that is what it is?
It could be. I mean, it's certainly her feelings. I mean, at the end of the day, it's actually her feelings for Patty that propels her through this episode. I mean, she has the Tammy and Neil like prodding her with like a cattle prod to make her focus on it. And maybe focusing on it is what cures her not being able to think about it. And because it's so closely related to what's happening with Neil, in the fact that that's why she is faking her death, that she mixes up what the two emotions are, the two thoughts are. But at the end of the day, this episode is really about her feelings for Patty. Because if she didn't care about Patty, you wouldn't have that moment where she hugs her and stops the chaotic, percussive drum beating. You don't have the moment where she takes a long breath and a hug and then tells her, I'll fix it. If she didn't care about Patty, if she was obtuse to her feelings for her, you wouldn't have that scene because she wouldn't give a shit. She would just be using Patty. That scene redeems so much of Allison's behavior for Patty, right? It really is the crystallization of what we've talked about all season, this arc of Allison actually becoming a very good friend to Patty in the way Allison can. This is the peak of that character arc and development for her. So yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that's as valid a thought as it being Neil, which is how I took it kind of on its face originally. Because she says later on, Neil is the thing. Neil is the live grenade walking out there. But you're right. There may be subtext there that she's not even realizing it.
For me, I'm getting all kinds of like, Patty just wants her to say it's her, it's her. It's why she can't go. It's what is keeping her here. It's what is nagging at her. I mean, I understand Neil is a problem though. I mean, my God, for the amount of people he's like tattling this story to and everything, good God, he is a problem. He is really a problem.
I think it resonated with me with the Neil thing because they hadn't actually checked in with Neil about what he was doing, right? That was such a focus, especially in the first episode or two of the season. They literally had him tied to a post in the basement to keep him from being this live grenade out and about. Then they threaten him and blackmail him when he's in the hospital, and then they really haven't checked in on him. They really haven't been keeping tabs on what he's been doing or who he's been talking to, other than Allison accidentally stumbling upon the fact that he's been stooping Diane. They really haven't checked in with Neil very much at all. So that's why it worked for me on that level of, man, they really did lose the thread on Neil. They really have no idea what he's been up to. But I do like, given our larger conversation in this episode about the subtext of their relationship or the state of their relationship or what their relationship is and their feelings, I think there's a good argument there that it maybe relates to that too. And Allison didn't even realize that in this episode, which is part of the conversation. Allison hasn't, it seems by all intents and purposes, Allison hasn't started on her journey of really understanding what her feelings for Patty are. Whatever that ultimately may be, I don't think she knows yet, or at least can't verbalize it. I think that's why she can't say at the end of episode 8 in season 1, when she says without you and then stops and Patty says what? And I think that's why she can't verbalize why she wants to stay when Patty asks her in this episode why. So good to know. I do want to point out the metaphor of the mug. She kicks the mug down the stoop. Now, I grew up in Queens. I had a front stoop. I did plenty of drinking mugs and hot liquids on my stoop in Queens. Had I kicked a mug, we owned no mug that wouldn't have shattered if I had kicked it down the 5 steps of my stoop. I'm chalking the resilience of the mug up to a metaphor for Allison and Patty.
I like that.
That you can kick them downstairs and yet they don't break. They just continue to hold hot liquid.
They just continue to hold hot liquid. How about they just stick together?
Sure, that too.
I'd be like, look at those friends over there. They look like they could hold some hot liquid.
Yeah, well, they are hot liquid holders. So as are we all at our best.
In our own ways, we're just sacks of skin of hot liquid.
Hot liquid. I am a hot liquid holder, people.
So weird.
All right, let's hit some lightning round before we get to the final thought on the episode.
Okay.
Diane also goes to Dr. Gates. Shouldn't be a surprise, but it's interesting that Allison or Diane as a possible future version of Allison goes to the same doctor, a doctor who has no problem prescribing 40 years of sleeping pills to her. I mean, she has quite the pharmacy that she's able to produce for Allison.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Very different.
But again, this Dr. Gates, this guy who has all of these very, let's quote unquote, traditional thoughts about the role of a woman in marriage. Of course, he would prescribe anything just to keep her from not hassling Chuck too much. Right, that she has to eventually fight for a new mattress. Dr. Gates would rather keep her prescribed and drugged rather than she hustle her, hassle.
Doesn't that sound familiar? That's so 1950s, like tranquilizer.
Yeah,
Betty Draper. That's
exactly what. That's Dr. Gates. Dr. Gates is 1950s, or 1960s, Mad Men era doctor. He has not grown with the times, so I hate that fucking guy. He's like one of the people I hate most on the show. Did you notice the Chuck mug? Speaking of mugs.
I absolutely did. I was like, wow.
Chuck.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
I just had a thought while I was saying Chuck there. I was chanting it.
Yeah.
The unseen brother who bounced his basketball up the stairs in Happy Days and then was never seen again was named Chuck. Richie Cunningham had an older brother named Chuck who disappeared from the show early in the first season.
Wig.
An unseen character like Chuck.
I love it.
I wonder if that's an homage to who Chuck turned out to be.
That's super funny.
And I cannot help but think how you've noted in the past, man, they live in a really nice house.
Yeah, they do.
What does Chuck do?
Probably nothing good. He's probably in sanitation in the way that Soprano is in sanitation.
I like that.
I think nothing good. Nothing above board.
I'm touching the side of my nose for all you Italians out there. So you remember when I have this little note myself. Remember when Allison was trying to scam pills off of Dr. Gates, who would not give her pain pills, but would prescribe Diane all sorts of sleeping pills and other kinds of pain medication. Interesting that he wouldn't have prescribed pain pills to Allison last season. But remember when she was trying to score pills so she could kill Kevin? Now she's trying to score pills so she can sleep. What a difference a season makes. I just thought it was, this is how far she's come to the point where she truly is not trying to kill Kevin. She's just trying to escape. And right now she's just trying to sleep. I like that Diane asked her about vacation plans, or quote unquote vacation plans. I thought that was Diane being a good friend and talking to her about it.
Yeah, a good family member. Trying to check in and trying to be there for her.
What did you think of Allison's card that she left for Patty at Bev's diner? The card said, "I'm sorry, but you're better off," echoing the same sentiments that Allison has been hearing from Tammy all season, and in this episode specifically from Tammy and Neil. You're better off.
Hurt my heart. I don't feel like I have I don't know what is the last words that would be quote unquote right. I think she wasn't willing to, admit anything about what their relationship meant to her at that point. And so, I think all she had in her was to reiterate what other people have been saying to her. That seems to be where she was at for that particular part of her life. What did you feel?
Made me sad because it made me realize that at the end of the day, Allison still didn't listen to Patty and what she wanted. Given the conversation between Allison and Tammy about not listening to Patty, and then Tammy saying Patty doesn't always know what she wants, Patty telling Allison, "I want you to stay." At the end of the day, she listened to the Neils and the Tammys of the world and chose the "you're better off." Now, I think she's doing it out of the goodness of her heart. I think she's doing it because she thinks it's the right move as a friend, as a loved one, to protect Patty. But it still hurt my heart at the end of the day. That was the path that she chose. we got to talk about that final scene where she's in the area. It sounded like she said Danver, but I looked up places in Maine and I could not find a Danver. I did not have it with closed captioning on, so I'm not sure where she said. But where she is, she's in the ice capital fishing, or the best ice fishing in all of Maine. But what did you think of her plan to sleep? And the fact that we actually got to see her in this new world, this idea of Gertrude Franch beginning her new life.
That she actually pulled the trigger, that she did it, that the police actually say she's gone, you know, the whole thing. I mean, this is the big climax, you know, of the show for us, is that she actually did it. And we get to see where she goes. Like, most of the time shows just are like, and she's gone. And a lot of shows would just end with that. We don't ever know what happens to her. We don't ever know what's gonna go on, but we know she goes to Maine. Was Maine far enough for you? Did you want her to go someplace way further away?
I wanted her to go way far away, but remember, she's really working mostly off of that envelope of cash, of Keno cash from Diane. So and this is what she says to the librarian in episode 2 of season 1. How far could she really get? How, you know, bus tickets are expensive. Plane tickets are impossibly expensive. You know, train tickets are expensive. How far could she really go without blowing whatever money she has available to her? So I would love to have seen her go far away, but also realistically, how far could she possibly have gone?
Were you surprised that she took the hiking route?
No, I was surprised that we saw that. I'm surprised that we got any of this in this episode. This feels very much like stuff that you wouldn't get until the finale, but they really tease it with that entire back end of the episode. Let's talk about actually that final multicam scene, because there's a lot of stuff going on there. Obviously, it ends with the cops coming and saying, we found the backpack on the hiking trail. You have Pete doing she went on the fancy walk, and Allison and Patty's like, that's called a hike. Let's backtrack before the note, because there's a couple things that happen that we need to put on the board, because they're probably going to come up in the finale. One, Neil looks very surly and does not laugh at Kevin's joke. When he makes the you can't handle the tooth, you know, Neil's response is he doesn't laugh, and he says, you've told that joke before, and says it in kind of like a surly, angry kind of way. It sounds like Lorraine and Pete are getting ready to move out. Kevin, of course, interrupts their conversation about that, but that sounds like where Pete is going with that, because he says, speaking of, and they were talking about the fact that Pete lives there. What did you think at the beginning of the episode where Kevin assumes that Pete had broken up with Lorraine because she hadn't been around, and Pete reveals that Lorraine doesn't like coming by the house, presumably, though unsaid, because of how Kevin treats her.
Boy, do I appreciate that Lorraine's got some boundaries. She has her dignity, man, and she's got like a bar that she's not going to go under, you know. She's like, nope, that's not the way I'm going to be treated, and I don't like that one bit. I loved that.
I liked it because it showed me that there's actually a division, a firm division now between Pete and Kevin, though Kevin still seems completely unaware of it. Just listening to Pete talk to him in the beginning and knowing how he's come to Lorraine's defense, it definitely struck me that there is a problem here in this relationship, and Kevin doesn't, and only Pete is aware of it. So when you add that together with the end, I think that sets up some very interesting finale dynamics that have to be resolved. The Kevin-Pete father-son relationship. I'm very curious to see how they resolve that. And where does Pete wind up? Does he stay with Team Lorraine, or does he come back to Kevin's side? My hope is that he goes off and makes a life with Lorraine. I hope, because anyone getting free of Kevin, I feel like, is a good thing. So, but I think it's going to be interesting, though. I'm curious to see how they resolve that.
I'm excited for there to be that option for Pete, because he has the potential to actually do good things. I saw some good things with his heart this season that I thought, you know what, it is time to be calling Kevin's out on their biz, and he does care about Lorraine. And I don't know, I mean, in his own Pete way, I think he had quite an arc this season.
I think he did without a lot of focus on him. By inference, I think they really did a lot with his character and just to show kind of that growth. And I really think it starts all the way back at the political ad. I think when Kevin didn't go with his political ad that he spent so much time storyboarding and setting out, I really think that was the beginning of this rift that then just manifested itself even more so with Lorraine coming into the picture. But I think you can really trace the origin back to the political ad and the Worcester Wild dude. So kind of crazy that they've only been together for a month. So you're telling us that the introduction of Lorraine, the birthday party episode, which is episode 4, that's only 1 month ago in the show, which I guess, okay, it's been 3 episodes, so 1 month, but it also feels so much longer than that. I do like the fact that they go to Costco for their 1 month anniversary. I thought that was very sweet.
It's very cost effective.
It is. I love a little food sampler at Costco. Sam's Club, Costco. I love those places. You could have like a whole lunch there for free if you just are willing to eat whatever's being served that day. So
willing to eat whatever's being served.
Well, you know, some days you're going to get a crepe. Some days you're going to get like a scallop.
They have like the $1.50 hot dog, man.
Oh, well, I mean, that's actually paying money for food. I'm talking about the guys doing the samplers, you know.
I know what a sampler is.
I'll stay in the freezer aisle if I feel like there's a good soup being made at the end of like the aisle that's like not quite ready.
Oh my God.
I'll pour over the DiGiorno's that they have while I'm waiting for that soup to be ready. So
oh my God.
I think it's sad but realistic that it was Patty to ask where is Allison, even though Patty does not live in the house and seems like she's the one who's not currently, because it seems like Neil is a fixture on the couch again. Kevin obviously lives there. Pete lives there, but it's Patty to ask where Allison is.
Here's the thing. That means that she was gone overnight.
She was gone over a day. It had been a full day since she had been seen.
Overnight is the key. Overnight, right? That meant Kevin, in theory, went to bed, no Allison, woke up in the morning, no Allison. There's something about that alone, you know, because of all of his tracking of her phone and all of those types of things that he does do, where she does have to make an excuse where she goes and she would have to say she was at the diner and all these types of things that I'm like, for real? This guy just completely spaced on her not being here for that long?
Well, it makes sense with Neil being back in the picture, though, right? Because
that's true.
With Neil being back, the tension, there's probably a lot. That's actually, from Allison's standpoint, probably the best thing that could have happened for her escape plan, because there would have been less attention on her. He wouldn't have been seeking her out as he had been more when Neil was off with Diane. Now that Neil's back, he really doesn't need her anymore to fill any of those Neil voids that he was attempting to fill with Allison. So I think that was just good coincidence on her part.
Okay, Mike, so we have been talking on this podcast, in our Facebook group, and all over the place about, like, what is a satisfying ending to this series? This is complicated. What is actually going to make the audience feel like I got what I came here for? So we're going to throw that out to our listeners, and we want to know what you guys think would be a satisfying ending. You don't necessarily have to say what you even think is going to happen, but what would make you happy? What would make you feel like this was good use of my time to be watching these series? What do you want to see on that screen? And then you can also tell us what you think is actually going to happen, because those can be two very different things, Mike.
Yes. And I think in a show like this, you would probably be wise to assume maybe what would be the happy ending for you will probably not be what the actual ending is, only because I think this show has done a great job of not taking the predictable route. What's the phrase?
Subverting expectations.
Subverting expectations. So I think you'd be very wise to have a guess for how it ends versus how you want it to end, which may not be the same.
This is Caroline.
And this is Mike. Thank you for listening to Kevin Can Podcast Himself, your dedicated after show podcast for Kevin Can Fuck Himself. For one more time coming up next week, we just want to say thank you for listening. And if you wouldn't mind heading over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and rate, review, and subscribe. And while you're there, but particularly at Apple and at Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It helps the show get visibility. It helps other people find the show and join in the conversation. And you know what? I'm sorry, but you're better off if you just leave us a 5-star rating. I'm just saying.
We'll go hiking with you in case anything happens. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production.
Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.